Hello and welcome to Taking You to School with Dr. Tom Prichard. I'm your host, JP John Poz from the two-man power trip of wrestling. And of course, joining me is the star of the show, the former 8-time Smoky Mountain Wrestling Tag Team Champion, the one-time WWE World Tag Team Champion, and one of the greatest trainers ever in the history of professional wrestling, the Doctor of Desire, Tom Prichard. Dr. Tom, how are you doing today, sir?
John, doing great today here at beautiful JPWA. We had a promo class tonight, and I knew we would be talking, so I just wanted to stick around here so we wouldn't be late. Great
Nice,
day today. Yeah, very nice.
I love that background. Very cool background.
What a background, huh? How about this? Well, wait. And so we got the ring and JPWA, the banner. We have some pictures on the wall. We have a lot of things here. If you ever get a chance to come on down to lovely Knoxville, Tennessee, visit JPWA, and that goes for everybody within the sound of my voice. Come check us out. And if you can't check us out, I'll go ahead and tell you right now, you go to jpwrestlingacademy.com and find out all about this cool stuff we have in here. So there you have it.
I love it. Awesome stuff.
Me too.
To start us off, though, not so great news. The passing of Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, as he has just passed away at age 71.
Right, and you just reminded me that I did wrestle Paul Orndorff, and I think it might have been what I want to say, either Macon or Columbus, Georgia. Am I right? One of them.
It was in Macon, Georgia. Yes. How did you know that?
I'll tell you how I knew that, because Paul was in a horrible mood that night. Now, I don't think it was directed towards me, because he made sure to tell me he was having a discussion with Ole Anderson in the dressing room, and I could tell Paul was a little upset with something, whatever it was. He wanted to let me know it wasn't directed at me, and he didn't take anything out on me, but he was mighty upset. And I've known Paul since it was the first time in Atlanta where I met him. And I knew his reputation back then. He was a Tampa guy, obviously, who wrestled for Eddie Graham, and a lot of those guys who came up through that territory system in Florida were tough, because Eddie Graham was tough, and Eddie Graham demanded his guys, like Bill Watts, or actually, I should say Bill Watts, like Eddie Graham, because Bill studied under Eddie's learning tree, and would always make sure to have guys who had credibility in his territory and in his company. So Orndorff was certainly one of the top guys that any promotion during his heyday would have gladly loved to have on their roster. The first main event at the first WrestleMania, he's legendary, and he will live with that legacy to forever and ever and ever, and into some, because whenever you talk about that first WrestleMania, that was groundbreaking. That was history, and that was the beginning of a huge change taking over the wrestling business. And Paul Orndorff, without a guy like Paul Orndorff or Hulk Hogan to fight and wrestle every night, it would have probably wound up the same way, with Hogan being a big star. But I think it was because of Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff that Hogan became even more than a big star. He became one of those guys who showed everyone, all the fans, that he could fight. He could hold his own against a guy like Paul Orndorff, against a guy who had legitimate credentials as being a tough guy and a man's man.
And him and Hogan, such a great feud, drew a lot of money in a lot of places, especially Toronto, Canada. You know, they had the big event, 62,000 people. They didn't expect it to be that big, and it was just an enormous show because of them. They were the main event.
Well, the crazy thing about the history of this business, the culture, the attitude, and the approach that everyone took in the back, in front of the camera, everyone approached it as it was a major deal. Professional wrestling was a major deal in most of the territories back then. And Vince McMahon was determined to make it even bigger, and he did. And he needed the right guys. He needed the right ingredients to make the perfect business model, and Hulk Hogan was the key, certainly. But when you had a guy like Paul Orndorff on his tail and hot on the heels of his success, it just made everybody that much better when he stepped in the ring. So now we've lost Paul Orndorff. We lost Jimmy Snuka, Roddy Piper. Muhammad Ali was a guest referee. Pat Patterson was the referee for the main event. And I think the only ones from that main event left would be Hogan and Mr. T and Bob Orton Jr. Snuka's gone. It's incredible to me, but once again, I do understand we live in a different world these days. It's incredible for people who want to come and study or at least learn how to be a wrestler that you aren't interested in what wrestling was like prior to, pre WWE dominance, when there were territories around, when there wasn't as much information available. It almost feels like we were living in the Stone Ages. And my goodness, Stone Ages or not, you had some incredible larger-than-life personas, larger-than-life talents who came through the wrestling business, and some made a huge, huge impression on a lot of guys, a lot of people, just like myself, like you, Jim Cornette, people who loved the business because it was unpredictable, it was different, it was one of those things that not everybody understood or respected. There was a lot of ridicule back then too, but the strange thing is you had legitimate tough guys. You had some who weren't tough, but you had some legitimate tough guys, and when people went to watch wrestling, they weren't necessarily there to be part of the show. They wanted to be entertained, and they wanted to see guys who went out and did it right and did it with some flair and put a different flavor on it. So it's a shame that a lot of guys from that era and a lot of guys from that time period, we all get old. Nobody lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever. But I have to tell you, it is a sad feeling, and it's an emotion that I equate to and I often describe as when someone passes away, or when it just seems like the business keeps going in a different direction than we grew up with, like a cold wind just sweeps by you and leaves you empty. So that's I got to tell you, that's how I felt when I heard about Paul passing away. A friend of mine called me up and said, "Did you hear about Orndorff?" Well, no, I knew he was sick, and he said, "Well, he passed away a little earlier." So nobody makes it out alive, and a lot of us don't like change, for the worse anyway. I mean, change for the better, maybe, but Paul Orndorff was a huge, huge part of making this business what it is today, and was on that front part of the money-making part. WWE turned into money-making juggernaut. A friend of mine likes to say it's a juggernaut, the WWE, especially in those early years. And it gets lonelier every day, John, when somebody like that passes away. We may not have been close through the years and talked every day, but Paul Orndorff, Dick Slater, Eddie Graham, Mike Graham, guys from that Florida territory who were tough guys. You think they're going to last forever, and it doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
With Orndorff, you were kind of saying in the ring, obviously you wrestled him. You said he didn't kill you that night, but how was he in the ring?
He was fine. He was a pro. And I think the just the threat and just the knowledge that he could probably beat your ass anytime he wanted to, if he wanted to. But there had to be a reason for it. I'm sure everyone has heard the story about the Vader fight backstage in WCW and fighting Vader with flip-flops on and shorts. And you see that? A lot of people say, that didn't happen. That couldn't happen that way. Well, I could certainly see that. I wasn't there, but I can certainly see Paul Orndorff eating Vader's lunch. And Leon's a big guy, no doubt about it. He was a big guy. But I don't know that you can measure toughness in inches. You just have to measure it with heart. And Paul Orndorff had heart. He was a pro in the ring, which means he knew and understood what my job was, and I understood what my job was. So he was great. He was fantastic. And I got to tell you, never did I have a bad time anytime I was around him. I traveled with him and Tito Santana a couple times when we were up north, and they were older than me, but they treated me very cool. And I don't know that there are that many veterans out there like Orndorff or Tito or any of the guys back then. They all had a different attitude. They all had a different mindset, and it's a shame. Sometimes when somebody passes on, you're not sure what to say or how to say it or how do you reach out. And I've come to the conclusion that if anybody asks me about it, I'd be glad to tell you how I feel. But to be real and honest with you, it does get depressing. It gets really depressing because not only has the business changed and in a way died in some places, in some parts of the business. Now the guys that made it what it made me fall in love with are passing away. So it's just one by one, the world's changing, to be expected, but doesn't make it any less sad or depressing for me. Not to bring anybody down, John, but I got to tell you, Paul Orndorff is and will always be a legend in this business.
No doubt about it. It's interesting with him. You mentioned the Vader fights. Known as one of the toughest guys in the business. There's no doubt about that. And Kevin Sullivan was saying he was right there when it happened. Orndorff did beat him up with the sandals on.
You know what? Yeah, Kevin Sullivan has been in some of the strangest and more than a few history-making events in the business. And he became very close with Paul when they were in Florida, as well as the Graham family. And that just, to be able to have people around who still have firsthand knowledge and who are eyewitnesses to stuff like that, they need to make sure they record it and film it and have it for posterity. So, yeah, Kevin, I can see being right there. Kevin has been right there for a lot of crazy, hairy, sketchy stuff, if you got my drift. But I love Kevin Sullivan. I do. Always have.
With Paul, and obviously when he got older, became like a coach or a trainer and stuff. Did you take anything, or did you know anything as far as what he did for his training and kind of turn it into yours, or that didn't really jive together as far as him being a trainer, you being a trainer?
Yeah, no, I think when he was with WCW, I'd heard stories about Paul. I heard stories where he helped people. I heard stories where he pushed people. Again, there's not too much distance between a pat on the back and a kick in the ass, and you got to know which one works. And I believe Paul had that side to him that if you weren't pushing yourself, he was going to push you, and he was going to see what you had in you. I never got to witness his training. I never took anything away from his training that I know of, but I know Paul respected the business. He respected people who were in shape. He respected other people who appreciated and respected the business. I've come across a lot of people who don't feel the same way that a lot of us coaches did, whatever you want to call it. But Paul Orndorff was raised and worked with guys like Eddie Graham, Bill Watts, and later on in Atlanta and the Carolinas. So he was around the elite pretty much from the start of his career. Cornette has talked about Paul being in Memphis, and that's where they met each other, and that's where they had a great relationship formed. So I would have to, if I was going to guess, I would say Paul would be a pretty good coach, because I think the term fair or tough but fair would come into mind. That's always what I caught from him, and that's what I truly believe he would do: is treat you fairly, even if that means kicking your butt, because he sees something that you don't.
Do
That's
you
what a coach
remember?
does.
Do you remember wrestling him in Smoky Mountain at all? I don't know if he crossed paths there, but there was a Royal Rumble match in April of '92, a quote unquote Royal Rumble match in
Right.
Harrogate, Tennessee. That you guys were both in the same match. Don't know if you're going to remember crossing paths as far as that match.
Well, yeah, Harrogate, Tennessee wasn't necessarily one of the major towns on our list. I think for Smoky Mountain, it might have been, even though it might have had a big battle royal or Royal Rumble. Uh, a lot of people came in and out during that time. But every time every time I saw Paul, it was just like yesterday. I did a sit down interview with him about his career years ago at one of the conventions, and we sat down. He was sick. He had lost a lot of weight, but he was and he had he was having trouble speaking. But he went ahead and went through with it. We kept it about an hour and a half, which is still a long time, but we barely scratched the surface of everything he did. We got to the main points, and I I do remember going back, like I said, into the Macon part of it because of the circumstances and him being pretty mad. And I thought, oh man, I hope it doesn't. I hope you don't take it out on me when we get in the ring. So yeah, I have crossed paths with Paul quite a few times after that, but uh, I don't. I think I might have worked with him or wrestled him maybe twice at the most. Could be more, but it has been a long time.
I interviewed him, I want to say about 5 years ago or so, and it was great because I met him. I think I was with Tito or something at an autograph signing, and I met Paul. I said, "Oh, he'd love to do an interview with you." And he's just so great because he's like dead serious. He goes, "Do not give my number to anybody." Like, you know what I mean?
Anybody?
Gives you a
Yes.
little fear in you. And I'm like, "Oh, I don't plan on giving a number out. It's staying right here." Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be well. No, you wouldn't be surprised that sometimes you get your number put out when you're not really interested in doing with some business
Yeah.
with somebody who wants to book you here. Then got to cancel a movie here. No, I got to cancel a movie here. No, we have time. Don't have time for that. Yeah.
But he was great. He was so funny too because I asked him about Hogan because obviously those two were great together and great chemistry. Hogan obviously is a lot bigger than Paul. Paul's a lot tougher than Hulk. So I said, like what about wrestling him? And he said, man, he goes, Hulk knew if I wanted to shoot, he was in he was in trouble. So it's just so funny. Like he knows, like he's a badass, or he knew.
I think everybody knew Paul was a badass. Everybody understood, and Paul was again one of those guys that demanded respect, and he demanded uh, just common courtesy, not being a complete jerk off. And I think that might have been the thing, or I'm sure that was the deal with Bader. He wasn't ready, hasn't been ready, he wasn't making an attempt to do anything he was being asked to do. And back then, when it was your job, you did what your job asked you and or told you to do. Today, it doesn't. I don't know that we have that many, if any, Paul Orndorffs that carry themselves the way he did and had that reputation. Maybe in another business or another sport, another world, but Paul Orndorff was one of a kind. And those guys back then knew it. They knew they had to do something special to keep their spot and to keep somebody else out and keep someone else from coming in and just looking better, performing better, and you losing your opportunity. So that's a huge difference in attitude, huge difference in what the opportunities were back then as compared to now. So would a Paul Orndorff of yesterday make it in WWE today? I think Paul would make it anywhere and in any era with any talent. I just think he was that good.
He was such a great hand, a great worker, great look. but he fit in perfectly with that WWF larger than life era. You know what I mean? Those larger than life guys. Still remember that awesome LJN figure, where he's looking bigger than ever there. He just fit in perfectly with that era. And it's funny with Hogan, like he said he liked to draw with the monsters. Well, Paul's smaller and he drew a hell of a lot of money with Paul.
Yeah, but if you look at Paul, he had that nice, neat hair cut most of the time. Paul could be a monster. Paul could be a mean, nasty looking guy, even though he might have had a heart of gold. He had that way of making an impression and letting everyone know there was no doubt in his mind. I mean, I remember him wearing the robes, the gray trunks with OP on it, Ocean Pacific or whatever it was, but it stood for, Popo. Brad Armstrong, I don't know if that's where we got it open, Ocean Pacific, but Brad Armstrong called him Popo, and he was one of the boys in Georgia anyway, and he was one of the boys wherever he went, but he was also the guy. He was a top guy and wound up being a top guy for most of his career. I mean, even early on, they saw potential. The Brandon Bull, Paul Orndorff, they being the power brokers, Jim Barnett, Munchnick, and all the guys back then who made those decisions, saw this guy look like $1 million, wearing a beautiful robe, in shape, didn't look like your average bear. Hogan loved working with the monsters, but he also knew that working with a guy that was as tough as nails was the same thing. Didn't matter how tall he was. It didn't matter that he may not have been 6'8" or whatever, but he was certainly a guy that people believed in and had credibility. So when your fans believe, it helps you believe too. And Paul made everyone a believer every time he stepped in the ring.
No doubt about it. What do you think, like, at the end of the day, what do you think he's going to be most remembered for? The Hogan feud or being Mr. Wonderful, the gimmick? Or what do you think is his most memorable thing?
I would have to say Hogan, the Hogan angle, WrestleMania 1. But certainly when you talk about legendary items on his resume, it has to be knocking Vader out, whether he did or didn't. That's what the story says at the bottom line at the end of the day. So people will certainly remember his mean streak, his authenticity, the guy that he wasn't playing a heel, he wasn't playing to be a bad guy, and he wasn't playing a good guy or playing a baby face. He was a badass. And you can be a badass as a baby face, have people respect you, love you, cheer for you. You can be a badass as a heel and still have people love you, cheer for you, and want you to win and get behind you just because you have that something special. And that's the trait that everybody was looking for back then. And some guys had the total package. In fact, Orndorff, I think, could be considered the total package long before Lex even came on board. So, yeah, it's a shame that we're losing all our heroes, or a lot of our heroes. I think it's good. The number is going to grow before it drops, obviously, but that cold wind will blow through the street, and you'll look around and say, "Man, what's next?"
Well said. And today, even before we heard of the passing of Paul Orndorff, wanted to talk more about Smoky Mountain, just because around this time period back in 1993, Smoky Mountain had a show, or multiple shows, but really a tour called Summer Blast 93. So there were 6 dates. It was July 8th, 9th, 10th, then you skip a few days, then it goes July 15th, 16th, 17th. So 6-night affair, all Summer Blast 93. Interesting thing is it's obviously 6 different venues, 6 different places, but basically the same matches every single night. Is that normal for, like, I know house shows back then, some guys would work, but the same exact show 6 times in a row? Is that normal?
Well, now wait a minute. Hold on. Are you familiar with Memphis, Tennessee, and their territory and their booking?
So they would do the same, but same exact show in the same exact order?
what Memphis would do would be you would do live TV on a Saturday night. And that live TV in Memphis, Tennessee would be promoting Memphis on a Monday night. And they would also be promoting the last card from Louisville, which would be the last card from the week before from Memphis. Does that make sense to you? You follow me right now?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we do Saturday night TV, which would be bring you up to speed on that Monday night in Memphis. Then on Tuesday, we would travel to Louisville. And Louisville, Evansville, and the spot shows usually would be the same matches as previously in Memphis. Maybe it'd be a change. Maybe it'd be a couple guys off or substitutions or just switched around. But for the most part, yeah, that was a thing because there was no internet. It was just starting, and people weren't really talking about what was going on in the other towns. But you've always had your smart fans or people who somehow knew and were just that passionate about wrestling. Go to all the towns and see the same stuff, same finishes, same wrestling, same matches. But I want to say I truly believe back then. I'm pretty sure Jimmy changed up the finishes for each town just in case somebody came. Even if it was one person, it might have been the same match. And we might have done the same finish in another town too far away for people to know. But yeah, I don't think it was that uncommon back then, quite honestly. I think it was one of those things that Jimmy said, hell, it's going to be a summer blast. And how much better does it get when you have Jim Cornette and the Heavenly Bodies against the Armstrongs in that part of the country, or in this part of the country, let me say that. Yep. The Armstrongs were over like Rover. I mean, they were huge, especially Bob, but all the boys were huge stars in this part of the country. And Jimmy had to use what he had, and he used those guys to their full advantage. And I was you gotta really appreciate something like that to know you're gonna have guys you don't have to worry about. You can go out there and have a great match, not get killed, not break your leg, or have somebody punch you in the eye. And I think Jimmy was looking for something as an attraction. So put him in the main event with us and make it a 6-man, and just wait until one of those Armstrong boys gets a hold of him, and then by God, you better start praying, because Ma told me that he was going to get his hands on you, and Bob said he's going to give you a good old country ass whooping. I don't know. Yeah, they might have done that. They might have done that, John, and Jimmy might have done that intentionally just to give everybody something to see. Of course, he had a stacked undercard too, and it really was a lot of fun. This area, Knoxville, Kentucky, West Virginia, a lot of those places were really, really fun because you had passionate fans and you had passionate performers, wrestlers who would come to the building every night. At least I know I did. I would come to the building every night just grateful that I had somewhere to go and wrestle in front of booing and cheering fans who wanted to see great wrestling. It wasn't always about this is awesome or clap, clap, clap and everything else. It was about seeing a guy like Bob Armstrong or Paul Orndorff, who might have been older, but they still look great and they still loved wrestling. And you can tell, especially anybody who's been to professional wrestling, when it was professional wrestling, you can understand and see when someone is feeling what they're doing in the ring is authentic and real. And it sure helps when you have a great crowd who's really into it as well, man. It really, really is. Smoky Mountain and the Summer Blast was a perfect thing. Hot weather and hot buildings and hot action all the way around.
Now, as far as the actual shows, first show was in Hazard, Kentucky at the Memorial Gymnasium, USA Memorial Gymnasium. It was only 400 people in attendance for that one. The second show was in Fleming Neon, Kentucky, at the Fleming Neon High School. Only had about 375 people. Then Beckley, West Virginia, at the Raleigh County Armory, 475 people. Then the next was Evans, Kentucky, at the Evans High School. The attendance was almost only 400. Then the big one, Knoxville, Tennessee, at the Civic Coliseum was 1,100. Then Johnson City, Tennessee, at the Freedom Hall was between 900 and 1,000 people in attendance. So towards the end of the tour, it got bigger. But obviously, Hazard, Fleming, Neon, Beckley, and Evans are very, very small spot towns, I guess you could say.
Well, yeah, and once again, how can let me explain this? I think, if I can, back then, times were really changing. I mean, 85 is when I think the door was pretty much kicked in, and everybody was still rummaging through whatever drawers they could find and raid this talent and raid that talent and bring them on to WWE. Smoky Mountain was pretty much a bastion for the misfit toys and people who maybe didn't fit in Crockett, maybe didn't fit in WWE, but with Jim Cornette, at least he was making a conscientious effort to draw. But he was a one-man show. It was him. He might have had Brian Hildebrand and Casey O'Connor helping him, but Jim knew what he wanted to do. He could try to explain his vision, and he could try to have people put out the placards and the posters and things like that, and he did. But even when you're doing that, and I don't, if you've never put out flyers or never gone out papering a town, then you don't know what it's like. You have to have the same amount of passion and energy promoting the show as you do when you get there and get the opportunity to go out and perform. But with Jim doing everything, plus working and booking and having to worry about the publicity, this was a time when, okay, you guys are trying, but you're not WWE, you're not NWA, you're Smoky Mountain. You know, the way wrestling was and the way you liked it, or the way it used to be and the way you like it. And while some people did, we found out, and of course this happens with every business, every sport, you have to evolve. As the older generation was getting older and the newer generation was coming up, 400 people in some of these towns wasn't really that bad. You know, usually the rule of thumb was if WWE or NWA were doing great, so were the independents, so were the smaller companies. But as it went on, you know, we went through that wave of fans that kind of lost interest once the style was changed. And now a lot of those people don't watch anymore because it's not what they wanted. It's not the way it was. And as much as we want it to be, the reality is it's not. It won't be the same old professional wrestling it was in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or even the 2000s. I think everybody's looking for a new way to do things, a new angle, a new slant, whatever you want to call it. And I think today everybody would be happy. I mean, they would be doing somersaults, moonsaults, if they drew 400 people. But back then, you're right, overhead, cost, all the expenses that go into running a wrestling show that nobody has an idea about is what we all had to realize. And no matter how much money somebody has, there is no such thing as a bottomless pit. And Rick Rubin, being the businessman he is, understands. You can't just keep losing money and expect different results, doing something over and over and over, expecting different results. We all know what that equals. So we were insane in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, but we had a vision. Actually, Jimmy had a vision. Rick Rubin had a vision, and he sold it to the rest of us. And we believed in them, and I say it all the time. I have nothing but love, respect, and admiration for Jim Cornette for all he's done with minimal help. He was a workhorse, and he put a lot of effort into everything he did. And he understood that a lot of people wanted to see him get his ass kicked. So this was a perfect opportunity to throw it out there. Let's do something. Let's give him just a little and snatch it right back away from him. By the end of the tour, by the end of the summer, I think we might have given everybody who came what they wanted. Some wanted Jim to get his ass kicked. Others wanted the Armstrongs to get their ass kicked. But you always have that too. You have your heel fans and you have your loyal fans. And I don't think either are bad.
So the card itself, Dirty White Boy defeats Bobby Blaze. Chris Candido defeats Tim Horner for the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Tag Team Championship in a no DQ match. The Bruise Brothers, who are Ron and Don Harris, defeat the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Moore and Robert Gibson, for the Smoky Mountain Heavyweight Championship. Tracy Smothers defeats Brian Lee. And, of course, the main event every night was a six-man tag team championship. Six-man tag match. Bob Armstrong, Scott Armstrong, Steve Armstrong defeat Jim Cornette, yourself, and Jimmy Del Rey, of course, the Heavenly Body. The interesting thing is 5 nights in a row, those are the what happens. On the 6th night, he changes it, which is the last night of the tour. Tim Horner beats Candido in one of the matches, and then Brian Lee beats Tracy Smothers for the title. But those are the only 2 changes he did, and that was the last, I guess, the headliner or the big thing for the show to finish it off for the tour.
Well, I asked you earlier, there was a string of matches. Pardon me. A string of matches with us facing the Rock and Roll Express, where we won the belts one night, dropped them the next, won them back, dropped them the next. Rock and Roll beat us 2 times in a row, something like that. Maybe it was 7 matches in a row, but it very well could have been Jimmy's idea to give people something along those lines of, you never know what's going to happen. And we drop the belts one night, get them back the next, drop them again, get them back, keep them a day or 2, and then follow suit with hopefully people who were coming. I don't know exactly, and I'm not sure because I wasn't out talking to a lot of people back then. We were heels, and we were mimicking our behavior as such, and we weren't. Our deal wasn't to go out and make friends with anybody. And but I'm sure a lot of the same faces came, because if not, I don't think we would have had 400 people. We might have had 2. And so thank God for the loyal fans like that of Smoky Mountain who would come out, and even if they had to travel. There was a buzz when it first started. There was some excitement when it first started. But we had to realize, Jim had to realize, everybody in the business had to realize that things were changing. And to do a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly territory anymore just wasn't viable. It just didn't work. The model was fading away fast, and we had to learn how to adjust. And that, I think, though, that period of wrestling, especially in the South, you had great talent like the Rock and Roll, Brad Armstrong, Paul Orndorff would come in at times, the Funks. So it wasn't like it was just full of scrubs or everybody was totally ignoring Smoky Mountain. You still had people talking, and in this area with the Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia ties, people loved wrestling, and thank God it was still around back then. But generations change, people change, and that cold wind blows right on.
Very true. And like I said, Brian Lee ends up beating Tracy Smothers to kind of change it up. Horner beats Candido, change it up on that last night. The last 2 nights of the tour, Knoxville and Johnson City, 1,100, and then about a little bit over 900. Those 2 nights. So those are good shows and good towns. I guess those are more of the highlights, or the big towns, quote unquote, rather than those small towns in West Virginia and Kentucky.
Yeah, because have you ever been to West Virginia?
Yes, a bunch.
Yes, me too. And it really is pioneering. It really is going up some mountain roads, and it really is some 2 lanes that are pretty treacherous.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, when I wanted to be a professional wrestler, I had the visions of traveling from town to town and being that vagabond hobo and never knowing what to expect, never knowing where you're going next. And that going to some of these towns, realizing that the people were making the effort, leaving their houses and going down these mountain roads just to make sure they got their wrestling in, and just to make sure they went to see if they could spit on Jim Cornette or take a swipe at him. And I'm going to get that boy one day, and things like that. That was very gratifying for a lot of us because prior to that, I was in Memphis, and Memphis was okay, but that was a lot of hot shotting over a year. And Eric Embry, who I respect greatly, was doing it the way he knew how to do it: blood and guts, blood and guts, blood and guts. And while he was, I thought, a pretty damn good booker, Jimmy Cornette, I think, is untouched when it comes to ideas. The little details that nobody really thinks about anymore, and elements of running a wrestling promotion that you wouldn't know about unless you'd been around Bill Watts or Eddie Graham or Ole Anderson. Bill and Jim had been around Ole Watts, and he just missed being able to learn from Eddie Graham. So he brought all that passion, he brought all that all the ideas, and rolled the dice. So, look, whatever people say about Smoky Mountain, small time, independent wrestling territory, man, I double dog dare anybody to find the passion, to find the energy, to find the actual realism that Smoky Mountain brought every time we stepped in the ring. Jimmy only had guys who were passionate about wrestling, who took pride in what they did, and made an effort for everybody who came that they enjoyed themselves just as much, if not more, than the guys in the ring. Because every time you went out, we were living for that 15 or 30 minutes we had to wrestle in the ring. And we were so fortunate and happy, I know I was, to be able to do that. Back then, there weren't a whole lot of jobs around in wrestling. And Jim called me and asked me if I was interested in doing this, just because Bobby was supposed to come with Stan and Jim, but Bobby had just signed a contract and couldn't get out of it. He had a family. So we just we made the best of it. I know Stan made the best of it for a while and then said, I can't do it anymore. He had done it in Charlotte. He had done it in Memphis. He had done it in Tennessee. He and Steve Kern, as the Fabs, they were drawing and making more money selling pictures than they were getting on a weekly check from the company. And they were still making pretty damn good money from the company with Jarrett Promotions. So it was a great effort by Jim Cornette, and you will never hear me say anything else besides that, because nobody knows the effort put in unless you were right there with him. And while I wasn't right looking over his shoulder on his kitchen table, I would see him at the matches and see the pressure mounting, and unfortunately that's one of those things that I don't think any wrestling promoter will ever escape, because it's their ass on the line. They've got to draw. They've got to figure out if you want to eat strawberries or worms, or do you like strawberries, and do you like to go fishing? Well, yes, but I'm not going to put strawberries on my hook. I'm going to put worms because fish like worms. I'm trying to catch fish. You're trying to draw wrestling fans. You know the area, you know the people, and in West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, they liked it hard, rough, fighting, wrestling. That's what they were raised up on, a lot of those people. And some of the younger people came into it too, were raised up on that as well. And they could tell the difference, and they would tell us occasionally, They said we really like wrestling, but we're not too sure about that WWF stuff. Not my words, theirs. But everybody was making money with WWF back then, and that was the idea. Still the idea. You want to make as much money as you can, but the culture's changed, John. I keep saying that, and I keep repeating that.
It definitely has changed, but it's a great stopping point. Let's get into your book, A Pro Wrestling Curriculum and Advice, Suggestions, and Stories to Help the Aspiring Pro get to the next level. Where can they get the awesome Dr. Tom book?
Let me just say, you said that better than I ever could have said that. That is really, really cool. And you can get that at jpwrestlingacademy.com. It's on the front page. Just click on the link. You can also find out about our next class, which begins, I believe, in September. No, it actually begins in October 4th through December 10th. We just started a new class here in JPWA on July 5th, and this one goes through September 24th. But the next class is a 10-week class in the autumn. All the information is available on the front page of jpwrestlingacademy.com. Check it out.
Nice. And of course, you go to Pro Wrestling Tees, ProWrestlingTees.com, get a JPWA shirt or get a Dr. Tom Prichard shirt. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website, Great Shirt, TMPTEmpire.com. Of course, you can follow Dr. Tom on Twitter at Dr. Tom Prichard. Dr. Tom, what else you got going on?
I've got a lot of stuff going on, John. I'm leaving 2 weeks is the gathering, Charlotte, North Carolina. I have a seminar. Let me just kind of lay this out for you, too. We talked about it a little bit last week, but in August, IWA Kevin Knight is putting on a big show. It's in Nutley, New Jersey. I guess it is a benefit show for Mike Cammett, who tragically was drowned, I believe, 3 weeks ago now. And I'm going to go down there or go up there on August 20th, 21st, and 22nd. We have a seminar going on. Mike Hollow and myself. I believe if you want information, I will have a website coming up shortly about that. But prior to that, in West Virginia, on August 7th and 8th with Joe Nelson, Chance Prophet. I believe you can check that out as well. I'll have a website for that next week. Thank you very much. But that's about it, man. We got the gathering coming up, which I'm really excited about. I get to give Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers a very special award. And I think that's going to be really cool. I've known Bobby for a long time, and I think he deserves any award that comes his way.
Awesome stuff, Dr. Tom. Thank everybody for tuning in this week. We'll see you right back here next week for a little Take You to School with Dr. Tom Prichard. See you next week.